The smallest things can change a life, but you never know which moment will be the one that stays with someone forever. I did not think that Tuesday evening was special. I thought it was just another long day. I was wrong. My name is Emily Carter, and by 6 o'clock every evening, my feet usually felt like they belonged to someone twice my age. Working at a veterinary clinic was rewarding, but it was exhausting too. Most days were filled with worried pet owners, nervous animals, paperwork, cleaning, and endless responsibilities. By the time I clocked out, all I wanted was a hot shower and a quiet apartment. That evening, cold wind swept through the streets of Chicago as I left work carrying my worn canvas bag over one shoulder. The city was already glowing beneath thousands of lights. Cars moved through traffic. People hurried toward trains and buses. Everyone seemed focused on getting home. I should have been doing the same. Instead, I stopped at a small convenience store 2 blocks from the clinic. The cashier smiled when he saw me. "The usual?" he asked. I nodded. He already knew. Every Tuesday and Friday, I bought several bags of dog food. Not the expensive kind, just enough to help. After paying, I checked my wallet. The remaining cash was not much. Rent was due soon. My mother's medical bills were stacked on the kitchen table waiting for me at home. Still, I never regretted those purchases. 20 minutes later, I reached an abandoned lot hidden behind an old warehouse near the train tracks. Most people never noticed the place, but the dogs did. The moment I appeared, tails started wagging. Shapes emerged from the shadows. A brown mixed breed with one floppy ear. A black dog with kind eyes. 2 younger dogs that always stayed close together. They recognized me before I even opened the bags. I smiled despite my exhaustion. "Easy," I said softly. "There is enough for everyone." The dogs gathered around while I filled several plastic containers with food. The sound of crunching kibble mixed with distant train horns. For a few minutes, the entire world seemed quieter. Simpler. Better. One of the older dogs approached slowly and rested his head against my knee. I scratched behind his ears. "You had a rough day too, huh?" The dog looked up at me as if he understood every word. I laughed quietly. Moments like those mattered more than most people realized. The dogs never cared how much money I made. They never judged mistakes. They were simply grateful someone showed up. What I did not know was that someone else had shown up too. Across the street, a black luxury sedan waited at a red light. Inside sat Vincent Romano. He had just finished a meeting that lasted longer than expected. His driver was talking about traffic. Vincent was barely listening. His attention had shifted elsewhere, toward the young woman kneeling beside a group of stray dogs beneath a flickering streetlight. He watched as she poured food into containers. He watched her smile. He watched her give away something she could barely afford herself. The traffic light changed. The car moved forward. Yet Vincent continued looking through the rear window until the lot disappeared from view. For reasons he could not explain, the image followed him all the way home. And that night, while an entire city prepared for sleep, one powerful man found himself unable to forget a woman who spent her last few dollars feeding dogs nobody else cared about. People often assume kindness comes from having plenty. The truth is that real kindness usually comes from people who have very little to spare. The next few days passed like any other. I worked long shifts at the veterinary clinic. I helped pet owners. I cleaned exam rooms. I carried bags of supplies. Life moved forward one routine at a time. Yet beneath the routine, pressure continued building. My mother's medical treatments were becoming more expensive. The clinic paid enough to survive, but not enough to breathe easily. Every dollar already had a purpose before it reached my bank account. Even so, Friday arrived, which meant the dogs would be waiting. That evening, cold rain fell steadily across Chicago. Most people hurried indoors. Umbrellas filled sidewalks. Storefront windows glowed against the darkness. By the time I left work, my shoulders ached and my shoes were soaked. I could have gone straight home. Nobody would have blamed me. Instead, I stopped at the same convenience store. The cashier looked surprised. "You are out in this weather?" I smiled tiredly. "They are out in this weather too." He understood immediately. A few minutes later, I was walking toward the abandoned lot carrying 2 bags of dog food beneath a cheap umbrella. Rain tapped softly against the fabric overhead. Wind pushed water across the pavement. When I reached the lot, my heart sank. The dogs were there. every single one of them, curled together beneath pieces of broken shelter, waiting. The moment they saw me, tails started wagging despite the weather. "You guys are unbelievable," I whispered. I quickly poured food into containers while kneeling in the mud. Several dogs ate immediately. Others stayed close beside me. One younger dog caught my attention. He was limping slightly. I had never seen him injured before. Concern replaced exhaustion. I moved closer and carefully examined him. Nothing appeared serious, but he was clearly uncomfortable. "Hey buddy," I said softly. "What happened?" The dog leaned against my hand. Trusting. Vulnerable. Completely dependent on kindness from strangers. I sighed. Tomorrow I would bring medication from the clinic if I could. Somehow I would figure it out. Across the street, another black sedan sat parked beside the curb. Vincent Romano watched through rain-covered windows. This time he had not arrived by coincidence. Earlier that week, he found himself thinking about the woman and the dogs more often than he cared to admit. Tonight, after finishing dinner with business associates, he instructed his driver to take a different route home. The route happened to pass the abandoned lot. He told himself it meant nothing. Then he saw Emily standing in the rain. Again. Feeding dogs. Again. Vincent remained silent as he watched her kneel beside the injured animal. Most people would have noticed the weather. Most people would have noticed the inconvenience. Vincent noticed something else. She never looked around to see if anyone was watching. There were no cameras. No audience. No reward. Just a woman choosing kindness when nobody would have known if she walked away instead. The realization stayed with him. Meanwhile, I finished feeding the dogs and checked on each one before leaving. As I stood to go, I noticed movement across the street. A dark luxury car. For a brief moment, I thought someone might be sitting inside. But rain distorted the windows. I could not tell. The traffic light changed. The car pulled away. I barely thought about it. My attention returned to the dogs. Yet inside that departing vehicle, Vincent looked back one final time. The image of Emily standing alone beneath the rain remained fixed in his thoughts, because for the second time he had witnessed something most people never saw. A woman with empty pockets and a full heart. And for reasons he still could not explain, he needed to understand why. The more you look for a reason to admire someone, the more likely you are to discover disappointment. That was what Vincent had believed for most of his life. People were complicated. Motives were hidden. Kindness usually came with conditions. Yet every time he looked closer at Emily Carter, the opposite seemed to happen. A week passed after the rainy evening. Chicago settled into the rhythm of late autumn. Trees surrendered their last leaves. Cold air swept between buildings. Life continued moving forward. At the veterinary clinic, my schedule remained relentless. Most mornings started before sunrise. Most evenings ended long after I wanted them to. Between work and caring for my mother, there was rarely time left for myself. Still, I never considered my life unusual. It was simply my life. One Thursday afternoon, the clinic received a golden retriever whose owner could no longer afford treatment. The elderly man sat quietly in the waiting room, clearly embarrassed by his situation. He apologized repeatedly. The dog rested beside him with trusting eyes. My heart ached. After speaking with the veterinarian, I quietly covered part of the treatment costs from my own paycheck. It was not a large amount, but it helped. The man nearly cried when he learned his dog could receive care. I never told him where the money came from. Some things did not need recognition. Later that evening I arrived home, carrying groceries and a bag of medication for my mother. Our apartment was small but comfortable. Family photographs filled the walls. The furniture showed signs of age. Nothing was luxurious. Everything mattered. My mother sat near the window reading. She smiled the moment I walked inside. "Long day?" she asked. I laughed softly. The usual kind. She studied me carefully. Mothers always notice more than they admit. "You are tired." "I am fine." She shook her head. "You always say that." Maybe she was right. I had been saying it for years. Meanwhile, across the city, Vincent sat inside a private office reviewing information he normally would never request. Not financial reports. Not business forecasts. Information about Emily Carter. The report was surprisingly ordinary. 27 years old. Veterinary clinic assistant. No scandals. No hidden agenda. No extraordinary connections. Just work. Family. Responsibility. Volunteer efforts. The more Vincent learned, the more unusual her ordinary life appeared. Most people became focused on themselves when life became difficult. Emily seemed to expand outward instead. She gave time she did not have. Money she could not spare. Energy she desperately needed. The pattern repeated everywhere. The dogs. The clinic. Her mother. Neighbors. Strangers. What is it? His longtime advisor asked after entering the office. Vincent looked up. Have you ever met someone who makes no sense? The older man smiled. Every day. Vincent glanced back at the report. No. I mean someone whose actions are exactly as good as they appear. His advisor laughed quietly. That is much rarer. The conversation ended, but the thought remained. That same night, I returned to the abandoned lot carrying food for the dogs. The injured dog from before was improving. His limp had nearly disappeared. Seeing him healthier made me smile. As the dogs gathered around, I sat on the curb and watched them eat beneath the glow of distant streetlights. The city hummed around us. Trains passed. Cars moved through intersections. Somewhere beyond the darkness, Vincent Romano was still searching for an explanation. What he did not understand yet was that there was no secret to uncover. Emily Carter was exactly who she appeared to be. And that simple truth was beginning to change something inside him. You can learn a lot about a person by watching what they refuse to abandon. A few weeks later, winter arrived early. Cold winds swept across Chicago. Temperatures dropped below freezing at night. The city seemed harder somehow, sharper, less forgiving. And for the first time since I started caring for the dogs, I became genuinely worried. The abandoned lot had never been ideal. But during summer and fall, it had been manageable. Now it was becoming dangerous. Every evening after work, I checked on them. Every evening, the cold felt worse. The dogs huddled together beneath makeshift shelters built from old pallets, tarps, and discarded materials I had gathered whenever possible. It was not enough. I knew it. They deserved better. One Tuesday evening, I arrived carrying food and several old blankets donated by a clinic customer. The dogs greeted me enthusiastically, but something felt wrong. One of the younger dogs was missing. My heart immediately tightened. I counted again. Then again. Still missing. I spent nearly an hour searching nearby alleys, parking lots, and side streets. Darkness settled around me. The temperature continued dropping. Finally, I found him hiding beneath a loading dock several blocks away. Shivering. Frightened. Alone. Relief flooded through me. There you are, I whispered. The dog slowly approached and pressed against my leg. I wrapped him in one of the blankets and carried him back. By the time I returned to the lot, exhaustion had replaced relief. I sat on an overturned crate watching the dogs eat. For the first time in a long while, I felt overwhelmed. I do not know how much longer I can do this, I admitted quietly. The dogs continued eating, unaware of the storm gathering around their future. Earlier that same day, a notice had appeared on a fence near the property. Redevelopment project. Construction beginning soon. Access restricted. The message had been clear. Their temporary refuge was disappearing. I stared at the paper again. My stomach sank. Where would they go? How could I move them? Animal shelters were already crowded. Rescue organizations struggled with limited resources. Every solution seemed impossible. Across the city, Vincent Romano received a report he had not requested but immediately read. One of his employees happened to mention a commercial redevelopment project near the train tracks. The location sounded familiar. Too familiar. Minutes later, Vincent confirmed it. The abandoned lot. The dogs. Emily. For several seconds, he simply sat in silence. Then he asked a question. When does construction begin? The answer was not encouraging. Soon. Very soon. That evening, Vincent stood beside a window overlooking the city while snow began falling outside. Most business decisions came easily to him. This one felt different. Because for the first time, the problem involved more than property or contracts. It involved a woman who had spent months protecting creatures nobody else cared about. Meanwhile, I remained completely unaware of any of this. The following weekend, I visited 3 animal shelters, then 2 rescue organizations, then another shelter farther outside the city. Every conversation ended the same way. No room, no funding, no available space. By Sunday evening, hope felt increasingly fragile. I sat inside my apartment reviewing notes and phone numbers while my mother watched quietly from across the room. Finally she spoke. "You look like someone carrying the weight of the world." I smiled weakly. "Only a small part of it." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Sometimes help appears when you least expect it." I wanted to believe her. I truly did. But as I looked at the growing list of obstacles, optimism felt difficult. Outside, snow continued falling across Chicago. Somewhere beyond the city lights, a powerful man was already considering a solution. And somewhere beneath a collection of worn blankets, a group of stray dogs slept without knowing their entire future was about to change. Sometimes the people who change your life never ask for credit. The week after the first snowfall felt endless. Every morning I woke up thinking about the dogs. Every evening I went to sleep worrying about them. The deadline for clearing the abandoned lot was getting closer. The notices remained attached to the fence. Construction crews had already begun surveying nearby areas. Every sign pointed toward the same reality. Time was running out. I continued making phone calls whenever I had a free moment. During lunch breaks. After work. Late at night. Most conversations ended politely. Some ended quickly. Resources were limited everywhere. I understood that. It still hurt. One evening after leaving the clinic, I headed toward the lot expecting another difficult night. Instead, I noticed something unusual before I even reached the entrance. Several unfamiliar vehicles were parked nearby. Men and women wearing jackets with animal rescue organization logos were carrying supplies across the property. Temporary shelters had been set up. Fresh food and water stations stood neatly arranged. For a moment, I thought I had somehow walked into the wrong location. Then one of the volunteers smiled and waved. "You must be Emily." I stopped. "How do you know my name?" The woman laughed softly. "We have heard a lot about you." Confusion washed over me. "What is happening?" She explained that a local rescue coalition had suddenly received enough funding to launch an emergency relocation project for several vulnerable animal groups across the city. The dogs from the lot had been placed near the top of the priority list. Veterinarians were helping. Foster families were being contacted. Additional shelter space had been secured. Everything was moving much faster than normal. I listened in stunned silence. It sounded impossible. A week earlier, everyone had been telling me there were no resources available. Now resources seemed to be appearing from everywhere. Who funded this? I finally asked. The volunteer shrugged. Anonymous donor. That answer only deepened the mystery. Meanwhile, several miles away, Vincent Romano stood inside a conference room reviewing reports that had nothing to do with animals. Yet his thoughts kept drifting elsewhere. His advisor entered carrying a folder. "The rescue project is moving smoothly." Vincent nodded. "Good. The woman still does not know." Vincent looked out the window toward the city skyline. "She does not need to know." The advisor smiled knowingly but said nothing further. Back at the lot, the transformation continued over the following days. Veterinarians examined every dog. Volunteers documented medical needs. Foster applications arrived. Donations increased. Hope replaced uncertainty. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. One Saturday morning, I watched the formerly injured dog climb into a warm transport vehicle that would take him to a temporary foster home. His tail wagged excitedly. Tears filled my eyes before I could stop them. Not because I was sad. Because I was relieved. Deeply relieved. Sometimes carrying responsibility for too long makes you forget what relief feels like. As the vehicle pulled away, I whispered a quiet goodbye and a promise to visit. That night, I sat beside my mother in our apartment and told her everything. She listened carefully before smiling. "I told you help appears when you least expect it." I laughed softly. "You were right." She squeezed my hand. "The world has more good people than we realize." I wanted to believe that. Somewhere beyond my sight, one of those good people was already watching another report arrive on his desk. The dogs were safe. The crisis was ending. Yet Vincent discovered something unexpected. Solving the problem had not satisfied his curiosity. If anything, it had only made him want to meet the woman whose kindness had started it all. Some meetings feel ordinary while they are happening. Only later do you realize your life quietly changed direction. A few days after the rescue effort began, winter tightened its grip on Chicago. Snow covered sidewalks. Gray clouds hung low above the city. At the clinic, appointments seemed endless. Pet owners arrived carrying concerns, questions, and hope. By late afternoon, I was helping organize supplies when the front desk called my name. "Emily, we have an emergency intake." I hurried toward the examination area. A volunteer from one of the rescue groups had arrived carrying a familiar dog. The older brown mixed breed with the floppy ear. One of the first dogs I had ever fed at the abandoned lot. My heart immediately recognized him. "What happened?" I asked. The volunteer explained that the dog had stopped eating and seemed unusually tired. Nothing appeared critical, but they wanted him examined quickly. I gently stroked the dog's head while the veterinarian completed an evaluation. Thankfully, the diagnosis was manageable. Mild dehydration and a minor infection. Treatable. Nothing serious. Relief washed through me. While paperwork was being prepared, I sat beside the dog speaking softly to him. He rested his head against my arm exactly as he had done countless times before. "You scared me," I whispered. A familiar deep voice answered from nearby. "Looks like he scared more than one person." I turned. For a moment, everything seemed strangely quiet. Standing a few feet away was a tall man in a dark overcoat. Confident posture. Calm expression. Silver-gray eyes that appeared observant without being intrusive. I recognized him immediately, though only from photographs occasionally featured in newspapers and business magazines. Vincent Romano. The realization surprised me. Men like him did not usually appear in neighborhood veterinary clinics on snowy Wednesday afternoons. For a second, I wondered if I was mistaken. Then he smiled politely. "I hope I am not interrupting." His voice was warm, far warmer than I expected. "No, irraplia." Not at all. He glanced toward the dog. "The rescue organization asked me to stop by. I have been helping support some of their recent projects." Suddenly several pieces began fitting together inside my mind. Not completely, but enough to raise questions. Before I could ask any of them, a technician called my name from across the room. I handled a few tasks and returned several minutes later expecting him to be gone. Instead, Vincent remained seated nearby. The dog had apparently decided he liked him. "That is unusual," I said with a laugh. "He does not trust people quickly." Vincent looked down at the dog resting beside his chair. "Maybe he is a better judge of character than most humans." The comment made me smile. We talked for a few minutes. Nothing dramatic. Nothing life-changing. Just conversation. Yet something about it felt unexpectedly easy. He asked about the dogs. I asked about the rescue project. He listened carefully whenever I spoke. Truly listened. Most people were already thinking about their next sentence while you were still speaking. Vincent was different. Eventually he stood to leave. Snowflakes drifted outside the clinic windows. "It was nice meeting you, Emily," he said. Hearing my name in his voice felt strangely significant. "You too," I replied. After he left, I watched his car disappear into the winter evening. I told myself it had simply been a pleasant conversation. Nothing more. But later that night, while sitting beside my mother and thinking about the day, I found myself remembering his smile. And across the city, Vincent Romano was discovering that finally meeting Emily Carter had only made one thing clear. He wanted to see her again. The questions that stay with you are usually the ones nobody can answer. After meeting Vincent at the clinic, I expected life to return to normal. Instead, something felt different. Not dramatic. Not obvious. Just different. Over the following week, I found myself thinking about our conversation more often than I wanted to admit. It was strange. We had only spoken for a short time. Yet there had been a sincerity about him that did not match the image the city seemed to have of Vincent Romano. Chicago knew his name. Newspapers mentioned him regularly. Business leaders respected him. Some people seemed intimidated by him. Others admired him. But nobody ever described him the way I had experienced him. Kind, attentive, quiet. One Saturday afternoon, I visited one of the foster homes caring for the dogs from the abandoned lot. The older brown dog greeted me immediately, wagging his tail so hard that his entire body moved with excitement. Seeing him healthy and comfortable filled me with relief. While speaking with the foster coordinator, I noticed a framed certificate hanging on the wall. It recognized a recent donation that had helped expand rescue operations throughout the city. At the bottom was the name of the foundation responsible. Romano Community Initiative. My eyes lingered on the plaque. Something clicked inside my mind. Vincent Romano? I asked. The coordinator smiled. You know him? I shook my head slowly. Not really. Well, these dogs are here because of him. She glanced around the facility. Honestly, a lot of animals are. I stood there quietly. The coordinator continued speaking, unaware of the thoughts racing through my head. Most people never hear about it because he does not like publicity. But he helps more organizations than people realize. The drive home felt unusually long. Snow lined the streets. Traffic moved slowly. My thoughts moved faster. Memories began connecting themselves. The sudden rescue funding. The emergency shelter spaces. The volunteers arriving exactly when everything seemed hopeless. The timing had always felt impossible. Now it made sense. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table staring at a cup of tea that had long gone cold. My mother noticed immediately. You are thinking very hard about something. I laughed softly. Am I that obvious? Always. She smiled. What happened? I hesitated before telling her everything. The rescue project. The foundation. Vincent. When I finished, she remained quiet for several seconds. Then she asked a simple question. Why do you think he helped? I opened my mouth, then stopped, because I genuinely did not know. That is the problem, I admitted. I cannot figure it out. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Maybe kindness recognizes kindness. I wanted to dismiss the idea. Sounded too simple, too easy. Yet part of me wondered if she might be right. Across the city, Vincent sat inside his office reviewing reports while snow drifted outside the windows. His advisor entered carrying several documents before pausing. You seem distracted. Vincent smiled faintly. Doi. More than usual. The older man studied him carefully. She knows, does not she? Vincent looked toward the city lights. He had not received confirmation, but somehow he suspected the answer was yes. Probably. And Vincent remained silent for a moment. Then he spoke honestly. I am not worried about what she thinks of me. His advisor raised an eyebrow. No. Vincent looked back toward the falling snow. I am worried about whether she understands why I noticed her in the first place. And for the first time since this strange journey began, I found myself asking the very same question. Sometimes the truth changes nothing and everything at the same time. After discovering that Vincent's foundation had been responsible for helping the dogs, I expected my feelings to become simpler. Instead, they became more complicated. Knowing who had helped answered one question but created another. Why would a man like Vincent Romano pay attention to someone like me? Days passed without an answer. Winter slowly began loosening its grip on Chicago. Snowbanks shrank along the sidewalks. The sun stayed out a little longer each evening. At the clinic, life remained busy. At home, my mother's health continued improving. And throughout it all, Vincent remained somewhere at the edge of my thoughts. Then one Thursday afternoon, an envelope arrived at the clinic addressed to me. Inside was an invitation. The Romano Community Initiative was hosting its annual animal welfare fundraising event. Community leaders, rescue organizations, veterinarians, volunteers, and donors would all attend. At the bottom was a handwritten note. I hope you will join us, Vincent. I read the sentence 3 times. My heart responded before my mind could catch up. That evening, I showed the invitation to my mother. Her smile appeared immediately. You are going. I laughed. You say that like it is not optional. It is not optional. She folded her arms. You have spent months helping animals. Go see what your work helped create. Saturday arrived sooner than expected. The event was held inside a beautifully restored historic building, overlooking the Chicago River. Warm lights reflected against polished floors. Conversations filled the air. Rescue organizations displayed photographs of animals that had found homes. Volunteers shared stories. Families mingled together. The entire atmosphere felt hopeful. I almost forgot Vincent would be there. Then I saw him. He stood near one of the presentation displays speaking with several guests. A dark suit, calm confidence. The same composed presence I remembered from the clinic. Yet something surprised me. People respected him, but they also seemed genuinely comfortable around him. Volunteers approached him. Rescue workers thanked him. Families introduced their children. Vincent spoke to everyone with the same attention and patience. It was not an act. I could tell. Eventually his eyes found mine across the room. A small smile appeared. Moments later he crossed the distance between us. I am glad you came. His voice carried the same warmth I remembered. Thank you for inviting me. For a second neither of us said anything. Then I decided honesty was easier than curiosity. I know about the rescue project. Vincent nodded. He had clearly expected that conversation. I thought you might. Why did you not tell me? He glanced toward a nearby display featuring photographs of rescued dogs. Because it was never supposed to be about me. The answer felt sincere, which somehow made it harder to argue with. As the evening continued, Vincent guided me through different exhibits and introductions. Everywhere we went, I saw evidence of the same thing. Animal shelters receiving support. Veterinary programs expanding. Rescue groups surviving because someone believed they mattered. The city knew Vincent as a powerful man. That night I saw something else. A man using influence to quietly solve problems most people ignored. Later we stepped onto an outdoor terrace overlooking the river. The skyline glowed against the darkening sky. Cold air moved gently around us. For a moment we simply stood there in comfortable silence. Then Vincent looked toward the water below. You know what impressed me the most? He asked. I smiled. I have no idea. His eyes met mine. You helped those dogs long before anyone was watching. The words settled deeply inside me, because suddenly I understood. He had never been interested in what I achieved. He had noticed who I chose to be when nobody expected anything from me. And standing beneath the lights of the city, I realized I was beginning to see the man behind the reputation just as clearly as he had once seen me. The things we remember forever are rarely the grand moments. More often they are the quiet ones that change how we see the world. Spring arrived gradually. Snow disappeared from the streets. Trees awakened with new leaves. The city felt lighter somehow. And for the first time in a very long time, so did I. Months had passed since the dogs left the abandoned lot. Nearly all of them had found permanent homes. The older brown dog with the floppy ear now lived with a retired couple who spoiled him endlessly. The younger dogs had been adopted together. Even the shyest among them had found families willing to be patient. Every success felt like a small miracle. Life at the clinic continued moving forward. My mother's health improved steadily. The rescue organizations were stronger than ever. And Vincent had become an unexpected part of my life. We spoke often. Sometimes about animals. Sometimes about work. Sometimes about nothing important at all. Those conversations became one of my favorite parts of the week. One Saturday afternoon, the Rescue Coalition hosted a community adoption event in a large downtown park. Families filled the walkways. Children laughed. Volunteers coordinated activities. Dogs played beneath bright blue skies. It felt like a celebration of second chances. I arrived early to help set up. A few minutes later, Vincent appeared carrying several boxes of supplies despite multiple volunteers offering to do it for him. I laughed when I saw him. You know people would help if you asked. He smiled. I know. Then why carry everything yourself? He glanced around the park. Because sometimes it is good to remember how. The answer sounded exactly like him. As the day continued, I watched him interact with volunteers, families, and rescue workers. The more time passed, the clearer something became. The city saw power when they looked at Vincent Romano. I saw something else. I saw a man who noticed people others overlooked. A man who listened carefully. A man who never asked for recognition after helping someone. Later that afternoon, the adoption event reached its busiest moment. Children ran between booths. Dogs found new families. Cameras captured happy memories. Standing in the middle of it all, I suddenly remembered a cold evening months earlier beside an abandoned lot. A handful of hungry dogs. A bag of food. A simple routine that seemed insignificant. I looked toward Vincent. He was watching a young girl meet her newly adopted puppy. The smile on his face was genuine and unguarded. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he walked over. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. I laughed softly. "How strange life is." He raised an eyebrow. "That sounds serious." "Maybe." I looked around the park. All of this started because a few dogs needed food. Vincent followed my gaze. Families. Volunteers. Animals. Hope. Sometimes the smallest decisions have the largest consequences. I smiled. I think my mother would agree with that. For a moment, comfortable silence settled between us. Then Vincent looked at me with the same steady expression I remembered from the first real conversation we shared. "Emily, can I tell you something?" I nodded. "Of course." His eyes held mine. "The first night I saw you, I thought I was watching someone help stray dogs." He paused. Later I realized I was watching someone show me a part of the world I had forgotten existed. Emotion tightened unexpectedly in my chest. Not because the words sounded dramatic, because they sounded honest. And honesty always mattered most. As the sun slowly lowered over Chicago, people continued celebrating around us. Dogs found homes. Families found companions. Volunteers found purpose. And standing there beside Vincent, I finally understood the lesson hidden inside this entire journey. Kindness does not change the world all at once. Changes one life at a time. Then another. Then another. Until one day you look around and realize that a simple act of compassion reached farther than you ever imagined possible.